the city lights illuminating the sky of Los Angeles reflected onto the streets, accompanied by the cool breeze of autumn. In the silence of the night, dry leaves swirling on the streets disappeared among the crowd of people. Despite the city's relentless pace, everyone was trying to get somewhere in their own lives, some rushing home, others seemingly lost in the flow of life. The air carried a faint scent of coffee and distant car horns, blending into the symphony of urban life. It was a night like any other, yet for some, it would become unforgettable. Some glanced from a distance, while others hesitated, contemplating whether to approach. His presence was calm, almost blending into the background, as if he were just another face in the crowd. Some glanced from a distance, whispering to their companions, while others hesitated, contemplating whether to approach. But Keanu, as always, didn't want to draw attention. He simply wanted to continue on his way like an ordinary person. Known for his humility and sincerity, he was a man who, despite his fame, still walked the streets, rode the subway, and shared the same life as ordinary people. His down-to-earth nature was one of the reasons why so many admired him, not just as an actor, but as a human being. As he passed through the turnstiles, his attention was drawn to an elderly man sitting in a corner of the station. The man's clothes were old and worn, his face pale, and his eyes glistening with exhaustion. In front of him was a cardboard sign written in shaky handwriting, "Please help. Cold nights are hard." The man's hands trembled slightly as he held the sign, his gaze fixed on the ground, as if he had long given up on expecting kindness from strangers. People walked past him, their footsteps echoing in the station. No one stopped to say a word or lend a helping hand. Perhaps everyone had their own reasons. Maybe they were in a hurry, or perhaps they were indifferent. But to Keanu Reeves, this man was more than just a stranger. He was someone on the fringes of society, yet still holding on to hope. Keanu, who had faced many hardships in his own life, understood loneliness and loss. That's why he could immediately sense the pain hidden within this man. Keanu paused, looked into the man's eyes, and began walking toward him. This man, whom no one had stopped to talk to, had caught his attention. He sat down beside him and asked gently, "Are you okay, sir?" His voice was soft, carrying a warmth that contrasted with the cold, impersonal atmosphere of the station. The elderly man slowly raised his head. At first, he looked at Keanu in surprise, then a faint light flickered in his eyes. "I know you from your movies," he whispered, "but I don't know why you're here right now." There was a mix of awe and confusion in his voice, as if he couldn't believe that someone like Keanu would take the time to notice him. Keanu smiled and nodded slightly. "I'm just trying to get home," he said softly. "But first, I wanted to see how you're doing." His words were simple, yet they carried a depth of empathy that made the man's eyes well up with tears. The elderly man took a deep breath, as if gathering the strength to speak. "My name is Robert," he said in a weak voice. "I used to be a carpenter. I made beautiful furniture. The smell of wood is still in my nose. But after I lost my wife, everything changed. First, I became lonely, then I lost my job, and eventually I lost my home. And now I'm here, like a shadow no one notices." His voice cracked as he spoke, each word heavy with the weight of years of struggle and despair. Keanu listened carefully to Robert's story. As he spoke, Keanu noticed the tears forming in the man's eyes. This wasn't just one man's story. Robert represented the pain experienced by thousands, perhaps millions, of people around the world. He had been a craftsman, creating beauty from raw materials, but life had chipped away at him until he was left with nothing but a cardboard sign and a plea for help. Keanu asked curiously, his voice filled with genuine concern, "Maybe it was better for her to cut ties with me." These words touched Keanu's heart. Loneliness is felt most acutely in moments like these, sitting against the cold wall of a subway station, with no one waiting for you, no one remembering you. Keanu knew what it was like to feel alone, to carry the weight of loss. He had experienced his own share of pain, and perhaps that's why he felt such a strong connection to Robert in that moment. Keanu thought for a moment, then pulled out his wallet. He selected a few $100 bills and handed them to Robert. "Take this," he said kindly. "Spend the night somewhere warm." And don't forget that you can make a fresh start when morning comes. Robert looked at the money with tearful eyes. This is too much, he said in a trembling voice. Why are you doing this? Keanu smiled faintly. Because someone once helped me. And I want to keep that kindness going. His words were simple, but they carried a profound truth. Kindness is a chain, and each act of generosity keeps it alive. Just then, the subway pulled into the station. The sound of the train doors opening echoed in the distance. Keanu stood up, gently patted Robert's shoulder, and said softly, "Take care, my friend." Then he boarded the train, and the doors closed. Robert looked at the money in his hand and then at the departing train. A tear rolled down his cheek. That night, he would sleep in a warm bed, perhaps resting properly for the first time in a long while. But more than the money, it was the kindness, the simple act of being seen and acknowledged, that touched him deeply. The next morning, Robert wasn't at the subway station. Perhaps, inspired by the hope Keanu had given him, he had decided to make a new start. Maybe he hadn't just spent the money on a night stay but had taken a step toward finding a new job. He might have reached out to an old friend or even his daughter, trying to mend the broken pieces of his life. Keanu's act of kindness had planted a seed of hope in Robert's heart, and that hope had begun to grow. Keanu Reeves never spoke of that moment to anyone. Because some acts of kindness are done in silence. And that's when they carry the most meaning. He didn't do it for recognition or praise. He did it because it was the right thing to do. In a world that often feels cold and indifferent, Keanu's quiet act of generosity was a reminder that even the smallest gestures can make a difference. As the days passed, life in the city continued as usual. People rushed to work, children played in parks, and the streets buzzed with activity. But somewhere, perhaps in a small apartment or a quiet cafe, Robert was starting over. He had been given a second chance, not just by the money, but by the compassion of a stranger who saw him as a human being, not just another face in the crowd. Keanu, too, went on with his life. He continued to make movies, to inspire millions with his talent and humility. But that night in the subway station stayed with him, a quiet reminder of the power of kindness. It wasn't just about giving money, it was about giving hope, dignity, and a sense of belonging. It was about showing someone that they mattered, that their story was worth hearing. In the grand scheme of things, it was a small moment, a brief encounter in a busy subway station. But for Robert, it was a turning point. And for Keanu, it was a reaffirmation of why he did what he did. He wasn't just an actor, he was a person who cared deeply about others, who believed in the goodness of people, and who understood that even in the darkest moments, a little light could make all the difference.